Hello and welcome back to Today in the Word. We're here again in the middle of our study on the book of Ecclesiastes. It's titled, What Are We Here For? And I have with me our author, Russell Meek. He's an online professor at Moody Bible Institute. And if you ever are interested in studying the Bible or ministry online, be sure to check out Moody's programs and maybe you'll get to have a class with Russ. So welcome, Russ.
Thanks for having me on. Good to be here.
Yeah. We like to deep dive in these second videos into a question that burbles up from the devotional. And this one is really simple and related to the title. How can we find our true purpose? Was that Solomon's question, or is there something a little bit more to it than that from him?
Yeah, he says in the end of the book that the whole of humanity, kol ha'adam, is fearing God and keeping his commandments. And so I don't know if he would say the purpose of humanity is to fear God and keep his commandments, but I think he would definitely say, and he does say, what it means to be human is to
Mm.
live in a relationship with God. So I think he's driving home this point that like to be fully human, to be what God has made us to be means fearing him and keeping his commandments. And that's shorthand, or that's the Old Testament way of saying living in relationship with God. So like I think that's the big issue that the book is dealing with. So you often this book, Ecclesiastes, is kind of presented as teaching everything is meaningless without God. And like that sentiment is true. Everything is meaningless without God. But that's not what Ecclesiastes is talking about. He is saying, okay, here humans are. We live in this fallen world. It's marked by sin. Bad things happen. We can't control anything. We don't know the future. We're just kind of here. And so what do we do? How do we
Mm.
navigate life? And he says there's two things you do. You live in a relationship with God, fear God and keep his commandments, and you enjoy God's gifts. So it's really this,
Mm.
I think, incredible picture of how we cope with life. It's not through drugs and alcohol. It's not through binge watching television. It's not through,
Mm.
kind of name your choice for avoiding life. He's saying to really, really live as a human being, you have to push into God's gifts, which are food, wine, relationships, and work. You have to push into those, and then you have to do all of that uh, in the context of a relationship with Him.
Yeah, I think there's a lot there about enjoyment and about appreciating what the good things that God has given. We all get hung up on the difficult parts of life.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
sometimes you can get so fixated on that that you do ignore the blessings. I go back to my childhood hymn, count your blessings, name them one by one, right?
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
what are the things that God has given you? And that
Hmm.
does reorient your mind a little bit, I think.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And especially, I think if we think about it in terms of not like, oh, God gave me a fancy house, God gave me a fancy car, but like, no,
Mhm.
God gave me this like turkey sandwich, which is like delicious, And so if we can like drive down to the like small basic things and see those as gifts from the Lord and enjoy them, I think that's really helpful.
Yeah, it's interesting that Solomon says that, right? Because he is someone who was so wealthy. And so maybe those simple pleasures had escaped his notice sometimes, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
I mean,
Hmm.
if you're surrounded by wealth and anything at your disposal, and so you might not, go barefoot in the grass or watch a sunset or something. But those
Right.
are
Yeah.
really those special moments where you do feel God's presence
Hmm. Hmm.
and
That's right.
feel close to Him. It's really interesting. What can so we've given that conclusion. If we go back to that question, how do we maybe we'll rephrase it. How do we live in an upside down life? How do we live in a world where things are crazy and often in turmoil? Um, it goes back to you would say.
Yeah, I would say a like steadfast relationship with the Lord. I mean, that is where everything has to be grounded. And often say Ecclesiastes is the most Christian book in the Bible because it presents
Mhm.
this apologetic for life that is lived in relationship with the Lord. And when I was growing up, I thought of Christians, like I thought being a Christian meant you don't smoke, drink, or chew, or go with girls who do. And so it was really the Christian life was framed in terms of like avoiding certain immoral behaviors.
Mm.
But Ecclesiastes does, absolutely say you should fear God, you should keep his commands. So like there is that element. But more than that, it says, hey, you should embrace relationships, like meaningful relationships. You should enjoy like the sustenance God has given you. And you should find joy in your work. Doesn't matter if you are a carpenter or a neurosurgeon. Like it doesn't
Mm.
matter what, how good or how valuable, quote unquote, your work is. Like what matters is that God has given you that work and that you enjoy
Mm.
the activity of the work. And so like this
I
joy
love
that
that.
God gives, yeah, it's accessible to everyone. It's not
Mhm.
accessible only to the
Yeah.
richest and the smartest and the hardest working, it's accessible to all of us. And so really, just like Ecclesiastes says, hey, death is coming for everyone. He also says God has given gifts to everyone and he's
Mhm.
made it possible for us to have a relationship with him. And so the vision of life that Ecclesiastes presents us with, I think is really compelling to people who don't know Jesus. So instead of
Mhm.
saying, "Hey, being a Christian means I don't get drunk on the weekends," it's actually being a Christian means I live a full life in relationship with these people that God has put around me, and we sing songs and eat meals together and live together, all in this like pretty incredible relationship with the God who made the whole universe. And like that is much more compelling to me than
Oh, yeah.
um, don't get drunk on the weekends.
Right. Because if all it is what we don't do, what
Hmm.
is that? What's the point of
Right.
that? But what we do is here, it's explained well. It kind of was bringing to mind as you were talking about that. It's almost like I don't know, the Wizard of Oz, where it becomes Technicolor at a certain point, but being in right relationship with God gives that color and depth to everything
Hmm.
around, not just when you're at church or not just this, but your work and your relationships and the
Yeah.
making the meal or whatever you're doing. It's is saturated with that, which I love.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that's wonderful.
Yeah.
We're going to end there because I think that's a good answer. Um, Thank you, Russ. It's
Yeah.
always a joy to talk with you, and I really do think people will be blessed by this study. So half. We're only halfway. So keep reading Ecclesiastes with us. We'll get to that ending where the teacher summarizes and gives the answer really to this question. Thank you all.
Yeah.